What is going on out there, lacrosse fans and sports bettors alike? Maybe you're more of a lacrosse fan, maybe you're more of a sports bettor, but don't worry, it's always a safe space right here on Bet On Lacrosse. I'm your host, Dan Neubert. Alongside me, as always, is the co-host with the co-most. It's Doug Greenberg. Get him on Twitter at Doug Greenberg. Dougie Fresh, after the bye week, I'm feeling ready to go. Pumped up that we got betting back. How are you doing, my brother?
Yeah, man, it's been a long, 2 weeks almost of no lacrosse betting. And, I'm feeling that itch again. I'm ready to go. I'm feeling good. It's an interesting slate, to say the least, coming back. But it's always, we talk about this all the time, but it's always an interesting slate because it's such a small league and it's a lot of, it's all the elite players in the world on 8 teams. And so every week is going to be, a different kind of weird matchup. And we're getting it again this week for sure. But it's nice to have it back. That's for sure.
Yeah, I can't wait to get into this week's slate just as far as games go. Like, I think it's going to be a terrific weekend of games. And actually, I kind of mentioned this on last week's episode when we were kind of doing a bye-week breakdown that gonna finally, for the first time ever, see some PLL action in person. I'm making the trip.
Yeah, buddy.
I'm at here in PA, going to Baltimore for Homewood Fields. And dude, I am stoked. So I'm going to be there Saturday, making a whole weekend out of it. And Saturday's slate of games. Whoo! Amazing. We got 2 primetime games this week. And on the show today, no Hutton Jackson. He decided, he was like, man, honestly, I got to edit the whole podcast. I don't want to sit there with you guys for an hour while you're recording it. We're kidding, Hutton. You can get him on Twitter at Hutton Jackson. You can find me at Newbie Talks. You can follow all we do under the Lacrosse Playground umbrella at Lax Playground on Twitter as well. What we're going to do this week, we're going to, of course, go game by game, give you our thoughts against the spread, making picks on every game. And we have some thoughts on totals as well, as bettors are rejoicing when finding out if your total bet won or lost just got a lot easier this past week. We'll get into that. Of course, as I mentioned, get our picks against the spread. We have our best bets making the resounding return. We got our EMOs making a resounding return as well, and some other things to get into here on the podcast. So without any further ado, let's get right into it, as huge news in the lacrosse world before we get specifically into the PLL Week 3 slate, which is a great one. Huge news in just the lacrosse world because, we talked about when we first started doing what we're doing, Doug, with the fantasy podcast, with what we're doing here with Bet On Lacrosse, and the fact that if you want to grow a sport, one of the best ways to do it is get people betting on it. And when you can get more eyes on a product, it's always going to be able to help you. Well, there's going to be a lot of eyes turning towards lacrosse relatively soon in the NLL future, as a new team is coming to the indoor, the box lacrosse, whatever you want to call it, league with NLL, as Joe Tsai gets together with Wayne Gretzky, the great one, Doug, Steve Nash, and Dustin Johnson, and there is a new NLL team heading to sunny Las Vegas. Awesome stuff, and even more reason for our meetup that we have planned in Vegas at sometime soon, Doug. Awesome news for lacrosse fans.
Date to be named later, man. It's going to happen. It's really cool. I am, especially as betting has become more legalized and people are becoming more legalized or more okay with this concept of sports betting all the time. I'm of the opinion that there should be a sports team from every league in Las Vegas because Las Vegas is the sports betting capital of the world. We've already got the NHL, we've got the WNBA, we've got I want to say there's one more. Anyhow, but now we got the NLL, making a huge step. I think it's a perfect product to actually bring to Vegas. It's one of those, I think, to the mainstream public, it's a little bit more of an oddity, and Vegas is just full of oddities, as we know. So yeah, I think it's an awesome step, and I think, oh wait, the Raiders, man. What am I talking about? Yeah, dude. That NFL team that nobody knows about.
The other ones are like a little bit more like homegrown. When I talk to people in Vegas, like they say, yeah, the Raiders, they're the Las Vegas Raiders. But at the same time, like the Golden Knights are the team in Las Vegas because it's that homegrown. It's theirs. You know what I mean?
Exactly. No, exactly. And that's a perfect point. They actually get to build up that expansion franchise. People love the Golden Knights in Vegas, as I understand it. Yeah, you're right. It is their team. And I understand this, this idea that the Raiders have a weird, long checkered history. And that's why this is such a good situation for this new NLL franchise, because they're going to get to build it right from the ground up. Got awesome ownership with Joe Tsai and Wayne Gretzky. I'm sure you saw the video of Tsai and Gretzky throwing around the lacrosse ball. And I was just
like that alone was worth the announcement. Seeing Wayne Gretzky, whose cradle is just so sweet. Like he could just be out there playing like freaking tiddlywinks, and Wayne Gretzky, the great one, would just look so cool doing it. But his like across the body cradle swag, he just oozes swag.
Dude just does everything so well. Yeah. And so, I mean, to have that kind of backing behind it, and who is it? It was Dustin Johnson and Steve Nash. Yeah, that's awesome ownership. I think it's going to be a really cool experiment. Just another thing to add to the Vegas pipeline.
Now, I'm right there with you. The backing behind it is terrific. The eyes it will get on the sports. And also, NLL already has a deal in place with BetMGM. So already a partnership with, U.S. gaming and lacrosse, which I think is terrific, which is super exciting for the sport. Now, I will say, along with the announcement of the new NLL team coming to Vegas, there was not a name attached, which let people on Twitter really start going wild, having brainstorming galore. I'm wondering, Doug, have you seen any, or do you yourself have any ideas on what we could maybe call? Because I have one or two ideas. They're okay. They're all right. I think they're going to get left on the drawing room floor. But have you seen or heard any or thought of your own of what we could call this Vegas team, which is just going to be terrific for the sport?
All right. Well, I need to get the brain stewing on this one. I haven't really put a whole lot of thought into it now until just now, but that doesn't mean I can't come up with one. So I'm going to let that stew for a second. I know that Hutton wanted us to bring up the one that he came up with, which I actually really like this one a lot, is the Blackjacks. And it's Blackjacks. He had the normal spelling, but then he also had the very NLL-esque spelling where it's JAX at the end. And I actually kind of like that. I think that's kind of cool. The lax Blackjacks. So that one
about that. That's good right there.
Yeah. So that one could be kind of fun. Maybe we can do the the strip checks. I don't know if that one's gonna fly, but
it's kind of suggestive, but then it has like the double meaning as well, where it's like, no, it's the strip check. Like, come on, you get your head out of the gutter. You know what I mean? I kind of like that one. A little suggestive. I like it.
Yeah, but Las Vegas Strip. I have a feeling they're not going to go with that one, but that's okay. They can if they do, they got to credit me. Those are the rules.
Well, we know the NLL brass are huge listeners of the Bet On Lacrosse podcast, and we greatly appreciate that. Like, subscribe, drop us 5 stars for sure.
Definitely. Hey man, what you got? I know you're actually sitting on a couple. You actually put some thought into this, unlike me. So what you got?
I mean, if putting thought into it is like when I'm like showering, I'm just like, oh, this would be a good one to throw in, and then you hope you remember it, because I'll forget things if I don't write it down. The two that I have, and the one I think is a little less on stewing on it a little bit, because there's already the Miami Heat, but I think Las Vegas Heat, cool, kind of like flame-esque logo, would be pretty sweet. But the one that I really like, because you and I were talking about it a little bit before we hopped on here for the show, initially when I heard of the Las Vegas Golden Knights, sounded like it was a little too long. You know what I mean? It didn't really work. It flows now. It sounds awesome. The one that I really
Vegas Golden
like,
Knights,
the Vegas Golden Knights. Just chop the loss off of there.
Yeah, chop the loss off.
How about the Vegas High Rollers? And then you got like a logo with like dice rolling or something like that. High Rollers is my shoe-in. It's like plus 5,000 right now, though, Doug. It's not looking like an odds-on favorite, but the High Rollers, that's got my vote right there.
I mean, I like that one a lot. I guess the one thing I'll try to think about with this too is maybe we can come up with one that's not, specifically gambling focused, because like the thing about Vegas is like everybody, when you hear Vegas, there's always some kind of subtext with gambling, and even the teams that already exist. In the Vegas sphere, the Golden Knights, it's an entendre with, you have Knights, you have Golden Knights in Vegas, right? And then the WNBA team is called the Aces. The Raiders are the Raiders, but whatever. But yeah, the Aces. I mean, I think the Aces is actually an awesome name, and I think it would have been a good one for this one too. But the WNBA already has that one, and then but I wonder if a lot of team names are like animals, right? And I don't know how much this is all going to fit for a lacrosse team. I don't know if there are animals that fit that mold, but you have I don't know, desert animals like road runners, or I don't know, coyotes. No, not coyotes. That's a hockey team.
I like it.
But I'm literally just thinking of Looney Tunes at this point.
Yeah, now you just call them the Bugs Bunnies and be done with it. You know what I mean?
Works for me.
That's what about if you're saying like Vegas centric thing? Like what about like the Red Rocks? Nah, it's not really working for me. What about the Vegas all you can eats? Because when I think of just going to some of these all you can eat buffets where I do some damage, they see me coming and they're like, shut down, tell them there's a line, forget about it. There could be a market there. I don't know. The lost hangovers. Maybe.
There's the bustling entertainment district. They could be like the Las Vegas Britney Spears, or they could the Madonnas. The Madonnas would actually be kind of cool.
That's actually kind of cool.
I'd be into that one.
I don't know how you could get. I mean, I guess they get pumped up in a locker room where they're like, "All right, water dogs, let's do it." So I guess you could maybe be able to work a Madonna's. Let's go and get this. Let's do this. Drop us a line on Twitter at Bet On Lacrosse. What do you think they should name the new Vegas team? But it's exciting stuff. It's going to be fun when we finally see some more announcements coming out about that. And also, folks, worth mentioning that betting and the NLL with BetMGM already being a partner is looking like that's going to be more and more the norm with some of these lacrosse leagues, which I think is just terrific. Worth mentioning, too, a lot of people is the box lacrosse up north across the border. Exciting news in the sports betting world today as we're recording here on a Tuesday that Canada has gone across that single game betting is now an option. Still a lot of hurdles to get through, but regardless, a lot of Canucks, a lot of folks up there in Canada, and we know we have some listeners up there are going to be excited that they too will be able to legally be placing some sports bets. Again, Doug, I think that speaks to what we talked about at the top, and that's the attitude around sports betting is starting to change. And as somebody who loves the industry, I couldn't be more happy about it.
Yeah, it's great. It's a like we said, evolving attitudes, especially north of the border, where now these folks who love hockey up there can share in my misery in hockey betting, which is my favorite thing to bet on, by the way, besides lacrosse, as everybody knows. But hockey betting, man, is absolutely brutal, and we know that people up north of the border do love betting on lacrosse as well. So no, this is great. It's a really awesome step. It's it's the kind of thing where with betting, it's just another one of those things where, if people bet irresponsibly, it can be harmful, but every book, every pundit, every person in this industry is always is genuinely expressing, bet responsibly. Like nobody wants, to see that kind of thing. So I think that now people are realizing it's like, all right, well, it's like alcohol. Like alcohol can be a terrible thing, but we're not just going to ban that. Right. So I think the attitudes are really starting to come around. And I think especially with, how popular online betting is, it's really just impossible to stop. And so there's just been so much momentum, and it's good to see that Canada's making it official up there.
I mean, every episode that we do, we remind folks, definitely, if you're betting, bet responsibly. Don't be betting with money you can't afford to lose. It's a great entertainment, but really with anything, moderation is always going to be key, folks. So if you feel like it's getting to be a little bit too much from you, step back, leave the account there. It's way more trouble than it's worth to constantly be getting some action if you can't afford it. So it's all about entertainment. It's all about having fun. So I'm right there with you, man. Just so happy that the stigmas around this industry are starting to get walked back a little bit because it's so much damn fun. And we're glad you're along the ride for us here on Bet On Lacrosse. So without any further ado, let's get into it. Before we go running down each and every game, giving our thoughts on this weekend's slate in the PLL, Worth mentioning, it's time to rejoice, as you will not need an abacus. You will not need a calculator. You will not be needing to put little tally marks on a piece of paper when trying to figure out if your overbet or your underbet hit, because the lines came out this week, Doug. It was just the spreads first. Probably about an hour later, we had the totals posted for week 3. And on those totals, if you go to bet them, a little line comes up that says, Doug, total goals refers to the sum of the final score. So it took 2 weeks, but I am very happy to share with you listeners, if you hadn't seen it first, and you should be following us on Twitter at Bet On Lacrosse, and you would have known first that, 2-pointers are now, like they are in every other sport, they actually count towards the total, as opposed to deciding, I'm going under by 5 goals right now because 5 of those goals were, but we don't have to do it anymore, Doug. And honestly, as we move forward, I think it'll be maybe a little bit adjustment period for bettors, but I think it will make me a lot more confident. And my best bet today may reflect that on playing some of these totals. I was very happy to see that.
Yeah, it makes things a lot less confusing for the bettors, and, props to DraftKings for actually listening to feedback from the general betting public, but definitely notably from the Bet On Lacrosse hosts, including Hutton. Hutton, this was his crusade.
This was the hill he was going to die on. Like he was truly like calling Congress people. He was knocking on everybody's door. He was sending emails. He was sending actual mail. This was Hutton's true crusade. You said it perfectly, Doug.
Yeah, exactly. And so, you know what? And like I said, props to DraftKings for, it took 2 weeks, but then again, like, I think the first week was a little bit of confusion. People didn't really understand what was happening. And the second week, everyone was like, oh, okay, so that's what's happening. Yeah, this isn't right. So they changed it. And I think that, it's a lot less confusing. It's more in the spirit of what the totals are supposed to look like for lacrosse, in my opinion. And it's absolutely the right move, and it definitely lets us evaluate totals a little bit easier this time around.
Absolutely. So with that said, let's get into it, Dougie Fresh. Friday night, 8:00 Eastern. You got the 2-0 Whip Snakes laying 2.5 points as the favorites against the 1-1 Atlas. We're looking at a total of 24.5. I'll start here. I think that a lot of lines this week are exactly how I would have made them. So, folks, I'm going to be having a lot of leans this week, but that's only because I think I'm seeing a little bit of eye to eye with what the books are seeing this week, which, unfortunately, while it might make you think, oh, my goodness, I'm a genius, I see exactly what the odds makers do. Unfortunately, when you're betting, it usually means there's not much value to be had, at least
lack of an edge.
Yeah, lack of an edge. Perfect way to say it. Perfect way to say it. He writes The Rundown, does Doug. Check it out on Twitter. Find him on Twitter at Doug Greenberg. Writing and cashing like crazy, baby. How about for me in this one, and again, 2.5, the favorites are the Whip Snakes. I lean Atlas in this game, and it makes me want to take a shower just even saying that. I think this line just sounds about right from the number that I make. Before the games, I always kind of work up what I think the lines may be so I can see when the openers hit, are there any edges here and there? I think this week we'll find out. Is the Atlas team that we saw last week truer to their identity, or what we saw in week 1, where they only scored a handful of goals in an absolute drubbing at the hands of the Archers? Is that more the identity of the Atlas? I think you and I are kind of a bit at odds at maybe which Atlas team is the truer form. Now, don't get me wrong. I don't know. I don't think that they can beat a well-oiled machine that is the Whips. I think the Whips do win this game, but I'll give the Atlas with what we saw last week and my boy, Jake Carraway, at least a fighting chance in this one. So I lean with them getting those 2.5 points, but again, I'm not crazy about it. That's just a show pick here for me. Any stronger feel in this game, Doug?
Yeah, I don't completely disagree with your assessment here, especially, when you consider Jake Carraway, who's looked, completely at home in this league so far. What I keep saying on the show is I never want to step in front of the Whip Snakes. They're so good at everything. They just top to bottom, they're just really, really great at everything. But I wouldn't be surprised to see this kind of turn into a little bit of a scoring fest. And it's kind of tough to say whether or not, Atlas would be able to pull it off. I kind of lean with you as well. I'd probably go +2.5 on the Atlas too. I'm not going to play it either, but if I had to pick a side, I'd probably be looking at Atlas +2.5. Like the fact that they're getting, that extra goal on the spread feels like maybe it's a little too much, a little tough to say. It is interesting maybe to look at the over in this game. Like I know Whip's defense is really, really good. Arguably one of the best in the league, but it's one of those where this is a total that's high for a reason. It's not the highest total of the week. So I wouldn't be surprised. And especially, with the teams coming off well rested, obviously defenses will be well rested also, but I don't know that we're going to get another Jack Concannon standing on his head game. I feel like those only come around once every few weeks, which that's the only thing you got to consider. And you know what? And it's definitely something that'll help you advocate for Atlas +2.5 is Jack Concannon. He's just such a wild card. And that's the only reason why it's hard to bet for or against Atlas. That might come into play later in this show. So stay tuned. But I don't know. Something tells me that this could be a high scoring game, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's a shootout type game and Atlas is able to stick with them.
Tied for the second highest total. And as Doug and I like to say, when you see a higher total, when you see a lower total, that's usually for a reason. I kind of lean with you on that look to the over. I think, prime time, a lot of juice there at Homewood Field. Also worth mentioning, if you do like the Whip Snakes, maybe it bolsters your point a little bit that it's a homecoming for a lot of these guys, not maybe specifically to Homewood Field as it will be for Kyle Harrison that we'll be talking about in a minute in the Redwoods game. But a lot of these guys are Maryland natives, are guys who went to Maryland. So, maybe a couple of their friends, some family members coming out, and it's more of a home game environment for them. That's something to kind of follow as we move through this slate of games. We go to Saturday at 5:15 for when I will be in the house. I am so excited that I'm going to be getting to see some PLL action live in the flesh. Huge shout out to RJ Kaminsky making that happen. But the 2-1 Redwoods are laying 2.5 goals. They're the favorites over the 0-3 Chaos. Total in this one low at 20.5. I bet lead off on how I was leaning in the last one. I'll let you go first on this one, Doug, as the Redwoods are 2.5 point favorites over the Chaos on Saturday's first game at 5:15.
Yeah, it's so tough because, both of these teams, this is an interesting matchup only because both of these teams, I would argue, have underperformed to this point. Redwoods were definitely a title contender, as they usually are going into this year. Chaos was in the title game last year. Redwoods was in the semifinals. So you expected a lot from both of these teams, especially with Chaos, having that offense that they have. It's high-powered offense, but, their defense has looked really, really suspect. Blaze Reardon can't really do anything to bail them out all the time. He can do it some of the time, but he can't do it all the time. But that said, Redwoods, and again, I always do this thing where I said don't be too reactionary, and then I end up being reactionary. But Redwoods have looked very troubling through the last couple of games, and not just because they lost to Atlas last week, but also they got a 3-goal win or 3-point win, whatever you want to call it, over Chrome in week 1. Okay, I mean, they're a much better team than Chrome. They still let up 11 goals, and they only got a 1-goal win over Cannons in week 1. And as we started to see, I mean, Cannons is starting to look pretty legit. But I don't know. I think a team as dominant, like Redwoods is not playing as dominant as, say, Archers or Whip Snakes are. And if that's the kind of team that you were expecting from Redwoods, then I don't know. I think that you could make the argument that in a sense they're underperforming more than Chaos are, which, well, probably not, because Chaos haven't won a game yet. But, Chaos has got to win a game at some point. I think last week may have been a little bit of a reckoning for them. So I kind of like them getting 2.5 points here. That would probably be where I'd be leaning on that one.
Yeah, this is one I want to stay away from. And part of it is what we talked about last week. If you didn't check out last week's bye-week bonanza, go back and check it out. A lot more of a deep dive as far as some more macro sports betting things. As the Redwoods, if they were 1.5-point favorites in this one, Doug, I mean, that would likely be my best bet. I would love them laying only 2 goals, but now they have to cover basically 3. Now, I know, don't get me wrong, the Woods are in a great bounce back spot against a team who is clearly struggling in the chaos. They're also, as alluded to earlier, they're going to have that added juice of Kyle Harrison's final game at Homewood Stadium. So I think maybe the look for me in this one would maybe be more to like parlay the Redwoods and the Whips when they face the chaos on Sunday and maybe get some of that juice down. Because I think the Woods could win this game, but I just don't feel confident with them, laying 2.5. So I'm kind of with like, I could see myself leaning both ways for the show purposes where we make a pick in every game. I'll lean with the Woods laying the 2.5 points, but same feeling that I said last week. If this team is laying more than 2 goals, I don't feel confident betting them just yet. There's just been too many examples of exactly what you said where, sure, you end up with the win. That's great. 1 and 2 against the spread, maybe against a struggling chaos team. They can put a little bit more of a stamp on it and send Kyle Harrison out. If there were some goal scoring props, I will say, if there were props on DraftKings, wouldn't the funnest ticket of the weekend, I'm sure the juice would be crazy down on it. Wouldn't the funnest ticket be Kyle Harrison to score in this game? Because the place will go nuts, Doug.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it would go absolutely wild. But then again, you got to be careful about stuff like that sometimes. Sometimes you let your emotions, drive your picks instead of your logic. I see what you're saying. It would be a fun one to do. But again, the books would know that one and they would they'd probably juice that up.
Yeah, even though Harrison had 1 goal, and I think last year he struggled to even find the back of the net, even though that the books would end up, it would be a plus 110. Here's plus 110 on a guy who hasn't scored all season long. Excellent point out of you. That's Doug Greenberg.
But it's, you know what? Purely hypothetical anyway. And just last point on the Woods that, it's one of the oldest expressions in sports betting, and it's found its way into the popular vernacular also. Good teams win, great teams cover. And that's something we haven't seen really from either of these teams yet. Yep. But Woods, especially, they're purporting to be one of the elite teams in this league. They got to start covering games.
Yeah, and Chaos 0-3 overall record, 0-3 against the spread. Still looking for a cover, and they've caught 2.5 goals twice, and they have not covered it yet. So that's definitely a storyline to follow here. Saturday, 8:00. I am so excited. I think this could be one of the best games that we've seen this season. Could even rival what we ended up seeing last week with the overtime game we had between the Cannons and the Whip Snakes, as the 2-0 straight up and against the spread Archers are a short favorite against the 2-1 Water Dogs. 2-1 Water Dogs coming off that great weekend, the highest total of the weekend at 25.5. But Archers in this one, the primetime game Saturday, only a 1.5-point favorite. I was scratching my head a little bit on this one. For me in this, and I'm kind of crazy for saying it, I would be pulling off the rubber band if the Water Dogs were getting 2.5. I still lean with the Water Dogs getting the 1.5. Now, I have my EMO coming up from this game a little bit later, but I'll at least mention that I think the fact that this game isn't minus 2.5 for the Archers tells you, Doug, that the odds makers don't think that the Dogs 2-0 weekend was any fluke, because the Archers come into this game looking like they can do no wrong. But I know, the listeners know, the lacrosse fans who listen to the show know, you never know who's going to make a run in lacrosse. So again, if they were getting 2.5, it would be one of my favorite plays for the Water Dogs. But at this number, I can only lean with the Water Dogs getting the 1.5, and I'll have a little bit more on this game coming up later. But your thoughts on what seemingly, if you think about what we've seen through only 2 weeks, that's a short line, right, Doug?
Yeah. And what's one thing that's kind of interesting, and this gets into some gritty line movement talk, is, given the way that lacrosse betting is set up right now, and there's not like a ton of bettors in it at the moment. And there's certainly not sharp bettors besides me and you, of course,
Yeah, of course. The listeners of the podcast, of course.
Right. Yeah, exactly. But the thing is, I think a lot of people are going to look at this line, and they're both going to have the initial they're all going to have the initial reaction that we both had, because we talked about this pre-show. We both looked at this line initially and we're like, interesting. Archer's only laying 1.5 and not laying the 2.5 against Water Dogs. I mean, Archers have looked so dominant to this point, and I think a lot of people are going to look at this line and think that same thing. But some people don't have restraint, and they're going to be like, "Yep, I got to just hammer the Archers.
Yep,
hammer the Archers, throw it all down on the Archers." And I wouldn't be surprised, because we don't really have a lot of sharp movement on here. We only have public plays, right? I would not be surprised if that line does get up to 2.5, and then you can be a little patient. Grab that Water Dogs plus 2.5 when it comes up there. So definitely going to be one to look at. Mm-hmm. It's so frustrating. Like I said, I'm not playing it at this one. I do love it if it does go up to plus 2.5, like you were saying for Water Dogs. I think I'd have to, I still got to lean Archers minus 1.5 just because they're just, I think they're flawless right now. They just have looked so good. And I knew coming in, and my priors prior to the season were that Archers were going to be one of the best teams in the league. And they have, shown that in flying colors so far. So I wouldn't be surprised to see them dominate this game, but I'm not super confident in it. And like I said, I think that another one of my priors coming into this year was, I think that Water Dogs were going to have a really nice year. I think they revamped a lot, and they really addressed what they needed to in goal with Dylan Ward. So yeah, this is definitely one to look at. And if it comes up to plus 2.5, it's definitely one that I'd be considering.
Yeah. Again, I think great points that you bring up there about how the perception right away, I did the same exact thing. I logged on, I saw Archers 1.5, and then I placed it before I even thought, when I took a step back and I said, wait, if I let the market mature a little bit more, the side that I actually like, because when I made my numbers, I made this 2.5, and in little parentheses, I said it should only be 1.5. So I was hoping we were going to catch that 2 on the openers and maybe get some plus money or something like that. But hey, credit to the odds makers. They're learning fast, because that's a good number right there. Yeah. It really makes you sit back and scratch your head a little bit.
And the thing too with the line movement also, and this is what makes me think you might be getting the line movement, is the fact that Archers are juiced minus 127 right now. So that says that, I mean, I don't know if it means that they've gotten the early action or that the bookmakers think that Archers really can cover this, but either way, I think that will tell some bettors like, hey, maybe Archers are actually kind of really favored here, and maybe that'll push it up to 2.5.
Yeah, if we catch that 2.5, Doug, we're pulling off the rubber band. We're putting a Punta Cana bet on it. But we'll move on here to Sunday. Doug's best bet actually is going to come from this game, so we'll glance over it real quick. And I think some interesting conversation may be coming out of it, as the 1 and 2 Cannons, yet 3-0 against the spread, are underdogs no more. They are now 1.5-point favorites in Atlas's second game of the weekend. Low total. Doug's best bet comes in this game. My best bet comes in this game on the total, but I'll at least mention the fact that Cannons 3-0 against the spread. And the thing is, we kind of mentioned on last week's show about them covering 3 straight games. Impressive that, a team who's the expansion team, the new kid on the block, is having a bunch of hits, because they had 3 straight covers, but all of those came with them getting 1.5. So we mentioned last week you could potentially see him as a favorite this week, and lo and behold, maybe we know what we're talking about a little bit, Doug, because what happens, Atlas coming off a Friday night game, we're seeing exactly that. So what we know about this Cannons team is they're great offensively, pretty darn good defense as well. A little bit of questions there at the face-off stripe, but they are great against the spread, but the only way we've seen them is as dogs. So we'll find out this Sunday, how do they do when they're laying points because of that unknown. I'm going to lean Atlas again in this game. And Doug, I know you have a best bet coming in this one, but any thoughts to at least throw in before we get to the last game of the slate already?
Yeah. And this game is so interesting to me. I was talking a little bit about priors before, and so a couple things with the priors here. For me, I looked at Atlas coming into this year, and my thought on them was, and I think I've said it every week, they're the closest thing to a rebuilding team that the PLL has. Maybe Chaos is in that conversation now, but
they weren't coming into the year for sure. The Chaos were not. Yeah.
Right. And Atlas, were genuinely, Paul Rabel took off. He's like, peace. And they got all these pieces in the draft, these very promising young players. But aside from Jake Carraway, we don't really know how a lot of them are shaping out at this point. And so I didn't have a whole lot of faith in Atlas to this point. My priors on Cannons were basically non-existent because I didn't really know what to expect from them. They're an expansion team. And, with expansion teams, you truly don't know what you're going to get because none of these guys have played together before. It's a mixed bag of players. The one thing that was very interesting about and generally you want to probably go pretty low on an expansion team, but the difference with Cannons is that they ended up with Lyle Thompson, aka arguably the best player in the world.
Yep.
So you just throw in this little wild card. They actually have a very solid defense. That stood up pretty tall at this point. And there's such an interesting case, and it's such a hard game to evaluate. I mentioned it before. You never know when Jack Concannon's going to stand on his head. But Atlas does get the 2 games this week. It's not a great spot for them, but I'll have a little bit more on this later. You'll hear about it in the best bet segment.
Ooh, I like it. Little tease there.
Little tease. That's what we in the business call it, a tease.
Yes, indeed. Industry terms, folks. You're always learning alongside Dan Neubert and Doug Greenberg here. Last game of the weekend. Then we'll step aside. We'll get you those best bets, as Dougie teased right there. We got your EMOs, your extra money opportunities coming up as well. But first, let's get into the Sunday slate. The final game, 2:45 Eastern from Homewood Field. The Whips back on the field again, and it's like I'm a broken record. The Whip Snakes, -2.5. Just take that little snippet, Hutton, and record it, and every week we're talking about the lines. Whip Snakes, 2.5-point favorites as they take on the 0-2 Chrome, still looking for their first win. Total in this one, 24.5. Chrome, a struggling team. The Whip Snakes, an absolute bulldozer. Whips on this one, -2.5 or pass. I have a bit more to say, but I'll let you bat lead off on this one, Doug. What are you thinking?
There's just so much drama around Chrome right now, and there's just so much I really thought they could be better than they were last year and the year before, and they showed signs of life at times last year. I don't know what it is with this team. It's so hard to form.
Put your finger on it, almost.
Okay, yeah. Oh no. All right. Well, it's just so hard to have an opinion about this team because I just want so badly for them to be good. I love their swag. I love their I love the colors. And I love the jerseys and
the best maybe.
And they've got such good players too, right? They've got so many good players in the attack and even in defense. I don't know. They just don't inspire a lot of confidence ever. And there's. My heart really wants to take them +2.5 so badly. I really, really do. Genuinely, I want to. I want to find a reason. Maybe if it goes to 3.5, maybe I would take them then. And I wouldn't be surprised because actually it's very much juiced to the Whips right now at -2.5. So I wouldn't be super surprised if the books moved it to +3.5 to try and get some action on the Chrome. And in that case, I would consider taking them. In this case, I'm not. I'll say it again. I can't step in front of the Whip Snakes. I can't do it. I think no matter what happens, even if they don't cover, I think Whips will win this game. So if you wanted to throw that hefty -335 money line into a parlay, that might work out pretty well. But no, I would have to probably say Whips -2.5 as of right now if I'm choosing something.
Yeah, I mean, and again, we end up sounding like a broken record. Now, one of the reviews we got on the podcast said that they love the stats we're dropping. So I pulled up some stats that really let you know that what our eyes are seeing, the kind of vibe that we feel around this Chrome team are exactly what the numbers are saying. Because despite focusing on defense in the draft and making some moves during this offseason, Chrome come into this Sunday's game dead last in scores allowed. They're giving up 14 goals per game, or I guess scores per game. Don't want to get anybody riled up. Now they're also second in last for scores for. only 20 on the year. They're dead last on the power play. They actually have only had one shot on goal in their man-up opportunities. That's not some extra money right there, Doug. You can run down the list, and the eyes and the numbers are saying the same exact thing. This team is struggling. So even with the second game of the weekend fatigue, for me, I'm with you. It's Whips minus 2.5 or pass. I would love to back the Chrome in this one. I love what they do. Hometown guy, Ryan Terafenko, doing all he can to at least give the team some juice. But again, I think you nailed it. Soul search is exactly what they have to do. And when you're looking for your soul against a Whip Snakes team, yeah, you're probably not going to find much there. We're going to step aside real quick. We're going to hear from the sexiest live reader ever, and then we will be coming back with our best bets, our extra money opportunities. So don't go anywhere, folks. If you're listening in your car, don't even move. Sit there. We'll be right back. Welcome on back here to the Bet On Lacrosse Show. Dan Neubert at Newbie Talks alongside the co-host with the co-most, Doug Greenberg. Find him on Twitter at Doug Greenberg, and definitely check out his daily rundown article, one of my favorite sports betting reads, which brings us to Take It Away, Tina. You're simply the best. I picked this song because it is, like simply the best bet, but it's also because, Doug, you are simply the best, man.
Stop
You're
it,
simply
dude.
the best. Gazing into your eyes over this Zoom call weekly is a highlight in my bleak life, Doug.
Well, you are better than all the rest. You're the next line.
So what is your best bet this week, Doug?
All right, my best bet this week, as I alluded to, was Cannons minus 1.5, minus 113. And honestly, it's going out on a limb a little bit because I've been waiting to get a vibe on Cannons. And what I'm going to take the chance this week and say that this is the last week where we're not going to consider Cannons an elite team. And I think that, having Lyle Thompson, I think any team with Lyle Thompson can be an elite team. And, up to this point, as we have seen, they've been underdogs all this time, right? And now they get to face a team, which, again, I mentioned before, I was not high on coming into the season. They got their Jack Concannon miracle game out of the way. Always seems to be one or two every year. I don't think he's going to get two. He's going to get two in 2 weeks in a row. And I just think that Lyle Thompson is going to take this game over. And I think that I think this is the opportunity to take advantage of Cannons. Like, again, they are favorites, but but they're not humongous favorites. This minus 1.5, minus 113 is still a very reasonable price. So I'm definitely big on the Cannons here. I'm going to go Cannons minus 1.5, minus 113 against the Atlas. And I believe you have something in this game as well.
I do, as a matter of fact. And again, Cannons are 3-0 against the spread in this one. Now that I finally don't have to have a scratch piece of paper, I'm going with the total for my first total best bet of the year. My best bet is over 20.5 in Sunday's slate with the Cannons and the Atlas. Cannons Lacrosse Club is leading the PLL in scores with a total of 38, and they have not failed to reach double digits in any of their 3 games. They scored 11, 13, and 14, most recently in that overtime loss to the Whips. Now, on the other sideline, which is why I think this total comes in low, I think Atlas is still being unfairly viewed by the market due to their week 1 18-6 drubbing that the Archers laid on them. Now, how did the Atlas respond? They doubled up their week 1 score with a 12-9 outright win over the Redwoods, which makes me think they're still getting some unfair hate in the marketplace, especially against a Cannons team who's currently allowing over 11 scores per game. Doug, for my best bet, give me over 20.5 in Sunday's game. Thanks, Tina. Appreciate you. It feels good to be betting totals again since I don't need a calculator, Doug. I full disclosure, I love total betting because then you're just rooting for fun games unless you take an under because you're sadistic. I don't know.
Rooting for defense, man. Nothing wrong with rooting for defense.
That's fair. It's fair. He does make a good point there.
Defenders are people too.
That's fair. You're right.
And goalies.
They have got us a lot. I mean, there's a lot of times that we won fantasy games during the fantasy season off of defenses. So that's fair. You make a good point there, Doug. Which brings us to our EMOs, our extra money opportunities. All bat lead off here. My EMO for week 3 is the Water Dogs money line over the Archers. It's plus 142 as we're recording here, but I would say maybe wait on this one a little bit. You can probably get a juicier number because nothing to take away from the Archers. They're 2-0 with the best scoring differential. They're 2-0 against the spread. However, you could argue after last week, the Water Dogs are every bit as hot with a 2-0 showing in week 2. And while the Archers maybe look like they're unbeatable, I didn't forget that they were in a hole early against a winless Chaos team before they rolled back to win by 4. I think the Dogs will present the first true test for the Archers. Maybe they'll pass the test. Maybe they won't. But that's what I'm betting on for my EMO. Give me the Water Dogs money line over the Archers. It's a risky one, but that what makes the extra money opportunities a fun one. Where are you going for your EMO, Doug?
You are a brave man stepping in front of the Archers, my friend.
Somebody's got to do it, right?
Feel that, bro. All right. My EMO is Chaos plus 175. I know, absolute madman taking the 0-3 team. But here's the deal with Chaos, and we were alluding to this before. This is a team that, and I think I might have taken them last week too. I'm out of my mind. The thing with Chaos is, like I said, they played in the championship game last year. This is a team that when they want to flip the switch, they can. And after getting absolutely embarrassed 2 weeks ago, they've had a couple of weeks to stew on that. And, they're going up against a Redwoods team that, as we kind of mentioned, they've underperformed too. And like I said, I kind of do like Chaos plus 2.5 on the spread, but I think that there's a good chance that Chaos really comes out firing here. And I think that, Andy Towers has had his issues, getting the room behind him and all that. But I think that this is a really, really talented team, especially up front. And I think they could get the win here. So I'll take Chaos plus 175 as my EMO.
So our EMOs, I step in front of the Archers. You step in front of the Redwoods. Hey, we may be right. We may be crazy. We may just be the lunatics that you're looking for. Thank you for tuning in and making us a part of your commute wherever you're listening to, or if you're just listening, getting ready to go for the games. Thank you. And if you enjoyed the show, drop us a review on Apple Podcast. Worth mentioning, some reviews already rolling in, some of which that we'll share with you here at the end. One of which says, Doug, we are the best lax betting pod of all time. I don't know how much competition we're going up against. We pride ourselves on the nicheness of what we do here, but they say these hosts bring stats and trends to the discussion, truly making your eyes open as a lacrosse listener. Most other pods just state the obvious from watching the games, but this group shows factual evidence and trends in gameplay to make your betting decisions. That's some high praise for us there, Doug.
Very.
Thanks
so
to that.
Kind.
Yeah, for sure. The other one we have here, we got Bet On Lacrosse. Very fun to listen to. Love the show. Great content and well written. Plus, they know what they're talking about. Good to know we have some folks fooled. Last one that we'll share here, Bet On Lacrosse review from Doodles for Davey. They say Dan and Doug compliment each other tremendously. It's nice to see two guys so passionate about the game of lacrosse. It's exactly what the sports need. More coverage, not to mention Dan has already been making me rich with his picks. Great stuff. There you go. Not to brag, but 8-2 against the spread, Doug. That is
pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah, not bad. I mean, maybe I'll go out on a limb and say that this is your burner account. It's a little, Davey, Dan, I don't know, could be, but you know what? We'll say it's authentic, and you do give out amazing picks, and the record shows for it. So, and not to mention, you're very good at what you do. You have a very nice voice. So,
man, we have a fun time doing it. Thank you for listening to Bet On Lacrosse. He's Doug Greenberg. Get him on Twitter at Doug Greenberg. I'm Dan Neubert. Find me at Newbie Talks and my burner account, Doodles for Davey. We'll be back next week. That's a wrap for us. Want to remind folks, you want to hear yourself on the show? Well, you can call into our money line hotline. It's up and running. Just visit the link in our description. You can maybe drop us some betting advice, ask for some. tout some of your wins, or recap your most recent wager woe. Also, we are on Apple Podcasts, so if you enjoyed this episode, leave one of those 5-star reviews. Give us your thoughts on the show and let us know, of course, if your bets hit. Find us on Twitter at Bet On Lacrosse. The reviews and the ratings help us bring you this show each and every week. So truly, they are greatly appreciated. We're also in the works of working up a little bit of contest, a little bit of a fun way to thank you listeners. So if you do leave a review, no matter when it is, you're going to be entered into our giveaway whenever we announce that. So stay tuned here and be sure to hit that subscribe button, share this pod with your fellow betting friends, your fellow lacrosse fans, and join us every week as we bet on lacrosse and hopefully, folks, make some money. Best of luck this weekend. Bet responsibly. For Doug, for Hutton, I'm Dan Neubert. We'll be talking to you next week.